Alright, YouTube, whether you're a supporter of or a critic of Trump, you know, of course, his proposals are extreme, draconian, and significantly different from those of the mainstream. Only that's a myth. It's actually not true at all. And Trump supporters, I think, are doing their own candidate a disservice often when they claim that they are. For example, the border wall. Well, that's funny. I can remember people talking about that back in the 90s, back in the 2000s. What's so new about that proposal? It's not. It's not a new proposal. The only thing that Trump inserted that was kind of new is, oh, Mexico will pay for it. And at the time I said, yeah, he's not talking about aiming cannons across the border and extorting money from them. He's talking about taxing imported goods. And he's talking about probably taxing remittances or something along those lines, which is indeed later what he clarified he was actually talking about when Mitt Romney jumped down his throat. It's not a draconian proposal. People within politics, including Democrats, have been talking about we need to fix the border, we need to secure the border, we need a wall, we need a fence, we need something here. The only difference being they've never actually focused on it enough to get people to conclude that they're actually taking it seriously. And I understand why. Of course, the Republicans like illegal immigration. Don't let them kid you. They love it. Not for any moral reason, for a fiscal reason, because then corporations, especially those down south in some of these southern states, can hire people illegally. They work cheaper. They don't expect health insurance. They don't expect workers' comp. They're working under the table. They die on the job. You bury them in a shallow grave. Most of these graves that they're finding down there near the border, by the way, with Hispanic, individuals sort of dumped there and covered over with a foot of dirt, those aren't cartel killings. Those are corporate killings from the U.S. side of the border. That's where they're coming from. I know you probably don't want to admit it, including those of you that are sort of like alt-right or something. That is what's happening. The Republicans will never build a border wall and then properly staff it unless you get populism inserted into the party, which Trump is doing, but he's facing stiff resistance. I question deeply, and this is why I support Johnson anyway, largely. I question whether he would be able to actually get full immigration reform implemented, because the Democrats would certainly be against him. They'll pretend that it's for moral reasons, but it's not. It's for political reasons. Meanwhile, most of the Republicans would probably as well stand in his way on such a thing, because it means they would have to hire actual U.S. workers that have to get workers' compensation. They have certain rights when you have them work for you. They get health insurance and all these things potentially. Even though they try to work around that too, like they cut when Obamacare was implemented, they just sort of cut people's hours. Then Obama said, "Oh well, fewer hours will now be considered full time," so they dropped them again. Which is why the economy right now, by the way, completely and utterly sucks. There's no reason for many people to work. They're not going to make enough to live on anyway. Then they have to take welfare, which means taxes go up, which means people earn less, which means more people need welfare. You can see where I'm going with this one. It's not a pretty picture. It only helps the top 1%. That includes the welfare system, by the way. That's who it's meant to help. It's not meant to help the poor. If they wanted to help the poor, they would slash taxes and get rid of all the alphabet soup agencies, and then the free market would take care of it, and people would go back to like in the boom times of the 50s when people were buying homes and they didn't have to spend, 10 years' salary doing so. On other proposals, he's not draconian either. Oh, we're going to lower taxes across the board. What's so draconian about that? I wish that I were in command of the situation. If you think that Trump's tax proposals are draconian in their cuts, you'd think that I was, literal anarchist mode or something like that, because I would slash most of these agencies out of existence altogether. There wouldn't be a TSA. There wouldn't be an EPA because it's worthless. It doesn't actually protect the environment. What's the purpose of having it? Department of Education doesn't increase our educational attainment, just makes it more bureaucratically strangled. I'd get rid of it. CIA has no intelligence. I'd get rid of it. NSA is treasonous. I'd get rid of it. Most of them would go the way of the dinosaur. The Geological Survey, yeah, they can continue existing. And the FBI, which sometimes does a good job. Some of these agencies would still exist. They'd face cuts, but they'd still be there. Most of them would not still be there. BLM, Bureau of Land Management. What purpose does it serve? Oh, well, some endangered tortoise lives here. You can't develop it. So we're going to sell it to China and let China develop it. What's the point? It's completely and utterly pointless. It's dysfunction at its highest potential level. So yeah, I'd get rid of them. You'd think I was extremely. If you think that Trump's draconian, you would hate my proposals. So yeah, I mean on fiscal issues, that's no, it's not really that out there. It's more in line with what any common sense conservative, so called, from the '90s would have suggested, and not really that far removed from maybe like Reaganite era Democrats and what they were proposing, like the Mondales or something like that, or even the Clintonians to a lesser degree. It's not that difficult to understand where he's coming from. On non-interventionism, oh yeah, maybe we shouldn't stir up the wrath of of Russia constantly. So you're telling me that there's something wrong now with not wanting the Cold War to continue reheating? Now, the Democrats spent years and years warning against warmongering, saying, "Oh, Bush this, Bush that, evil, Iraq. Look at what's done to our international relations." And yet you have Clinton blaming Russia for every one of her problems. I would think that that's more out there. That's more in line with what I would expect from a severely pro-war, sort of a Hubert Humphrey character from the atomic era than I would expect from even the Democrats. Clinton sounds a lot more, again, like Hubert Humphrey or something, really, and Trump in that sense almost sounds like a JFK. I hate to make the comparison because they have very little else in common. But that brings us to, I suppose, Trump as supposedly a lunatic racist or something. It's not. He's simply not. No, he's not a racist at all. He's not bigoted at all. He sees people as being valued in terms of their productivity, as a businessman ought to if they want to succeed. You can debate all day over whether that's the moral approach or not, but that's how he sees them. He desegregated the Mar-a-Lago. It was segregated when he first acquired it. He had to fight the state of Florida in order to get rid of the segregation ordinances on it, in order to let blacks and Jews go there, because prior, when it was a private club owned before, when he first acquired it, it was segregated, and that was still in the paperwork. He was supposed to leave it segregated, and he didn't like that, so he had to fight tooth and nail to actually allow minorities into one of his private posh clubs. The Clintons, meanwhile, until I think it was 2006 or so, were attending a segregated country club. They were. So who's the bigot? Look at the actions rather than the words. Islam's not a race. I have no problem, by the way, with banning immigration from some of these states that are run by Sharia maniacs. I also, by the way, wouldn't care if someone said, "Oh yeah, this country's full of Christians, yeah, but they're so violent and filled with, zealots and violence and so forth. It's just oozing from them like pus from a sore, so we're going to block people from immigrating from there." Because if somebody is brought up in an extremely religiously zealous culture, in which they're taught that church and state are not separate in any way, shape, or form, they are the same thing, that religious authority is the highest authority, and that generally the only punishment for disobeying that order is being killed or having your hands cut off or being stoned or something. If you are raised up in that sort of society, yeah, tendencies are you're going to be considered a religious zealot even if in your home country you're considered a relatively irreligious individual. Because what you consider irreligious, anybody else in the Western world would consider to be a zealot. You'd be like Westboro Baptist mode or something like that. I don't have a problem with that. The United States is constitutionally able to block immigrants on any basis it wants. Now, I've said before, I oppose Trump's overall proposal of mass deportation. What I would do is funnel these people who are here illegally back through the system. If they fail to pass a criminal background check, then they're out. They get deported. If they fail to pass a health checkup to make sure, you don't have like super tuberculosis or something, they would be treated, and then we would see and go from there. Or if it's an untreatable disease, yeah, I would deport them. They got AIDS or something because it's a public health crisis. Otherwise, I don't really care. Let them in. At the very least, Hispanics don't appear to be too receptive to like Islamofascism and stuff like that. I honestly, I'll say I don't care. Now, the Republican Party, in part, has been the agent of its own misfortune. Because in its haste to rant about welfare and things like that, a lot of people, especially alt-righters, have come to the conclusion that any Hispanic immigrant is an automatic Democrat. And that's simply not the case. I think what's happened is they were automatic Republicans that don't support the Republican Party primarily because the Republican Party constantly talks badly about their entire ethnicity. That's just my own personal feelings. I don't think it has anything to do with welfare. Increasingly, these people appear to be abandoning the concept of the welfare state, abandoning the concept of socialism in favor of a more free market because they remember what it was like in their shitty home countries, which is why they fucking came here in the first place. Whether illegally or legally makes very little difference. But no, Trump's proposals overall are not particularly draconian. Wants to scale back the Cold War. Okay, what's draconian about that? Mild tax cuts. What's draconian about that? Build a border wall. People have been talking about it for 50 years. What's draconian about it? What's that out there about it? The concept that Americans should come first. This is a foreign concept to us? Like our government is supposed to consider some other nation before it considers the interest of the people of the United States? That's not what our government's for. All these other countries, they have governments. They can put their people first. We should be putting ours first. By the way, I support him strongly on that. I think it's a great idea. I think we should stop giving money to Israel. I think we should stop giving money to Pakistan and Egypt. I think we should stop giving money to anybody. We should keep it for ourselves. We're already heavily in debt. And the idea, it'll cause more debt, his proposals and taxes. Well, he'll have to cut spending then, won't he? And I don't care. I don't care where the spending comes from either. Welfare? Okay. Social Security? Who gives a damn? Education? Okay, well, we should get rid of the Department of Education entirely. Military? Yeah, cut the military budget. The military budget, by the way, is only bloated because of no-bid contracts and things of that nature. It's not because we're spending too much on our soldiers, considering the way they eat, considering the sort of armaments they're using. No, it's not the infantrymen, it's not the tanks and the jets and all that. It's mostly maintaining them and the parts to create and maintain them from military contractors that bilk the people out of hundreds of billions of dollars. That's where the problem is. Stop them from doing that and stop using no-bid contracts. I guess you don't have that problem anymore. You can fund all the other programs fully and still cut the budget massively just by fixing that one problem in our budget. And it doesn't adversely affect the military. It makes it look like we're spending less, but we're not. We're getting the same bang for our buck and then some. So yeah, I'm failing to see any proposal that Trump has put forward so far that's draconian. Not a single one. Please show me if you find some policy that he's argued for that you consider really out there. I bet I can find some fairly modern comparisons for it. Something that's identical or at least extremely close. Because it seems to be the case with all the overarching general policies, whether you're talking about, again, economy, domestic surveillance, I disagree with him on, but it's not draconian because what he's talking about doing is the same as what Obama himself is doing and what W put into place. I happen to think it's a bad idea, but it's not draconian because he's not making any changes to the idea. I think we need those changes. It's another reason I don't support him. But don't pretend for a second that he's Hitler. Because he's not, quite clearly. There's an image, everyone I don't like or everyone I don't agree with is Hitler. That seems to be the way that people operate now. Clinton's the same thing. People say, oh, great progressive, great liberal leftist leader. No, she's not. She's just another corporate shill. She's further to the right than Obama. Arguably, and she's a lot more war-hawking. Obama's sitting there talking about wanting to launch missiles at Syria. That's small time compared to what Hillary wants to do. She wants to launch missiles at Russia too, apparently. Start World War III. Well, if you're into that thing, yeah, you should probably be a Clinton supporter. If you're some end times Armageddon lover and you really want to watch the world burn, Hillary is your person. She's also crazy enough to actually do that. All she's got to do is have another stroke and accidentally press the little red button anyway. No, Trump has not proposed anything specifically that's really that far out there. It's just a simple truth. People pretend that it's not the case. It is, though. That is the truth. You know, he's just a little bit right of center, basically. Arguably, a little bit more populist. A little bit more paleo-conservative. In some ways, that's a good thing. In other ways, it doesn't really help him any. That's about all. Peace out.